If I wanted to worry about the well-being of my players and needed them looking after better because they were being treated terribly on £50,000 a week, I'd bring in Martin to make sure that their bottoms were being wiped. Welcome to this week's edition of One-to-One with Simon Jordan, the last one for a couple of weeks because society's earned a well-earned rest from my activities. But of course, whilst I'm away, don't forget to keep liking and subscribing and leaving your questions in the comment section below. But let's get to this show. Newcastle United will have great ambitions and great desires to want to go straight out of the gate, but like most things, you have to build a solid foundation. Man City, when they alighted upon all the riches of Sheikh Mansour, took 4 years to build a team that was going to win the league. I think it's probably disadvantageous for Newcastle fans to start with the premise they're going to be a top 6 side. Nothing wrong with ambition. You should shoot for the stars because you might take the moon on the way up. But the point is you've got to build properly and buy properly and build a foundation for which a building can stay up on, because the stronger the foundation, the better the building. Now, I've got a bet with Jim White, which the miracle will be actually ponies up the money, but I've got a bet that Newcastle will not finish inside the top 6, so it's going to be difficult for me to make an argument suggesting that however much money you spend, you'll get inside the top 6, because if you look at the top 6 in all its guises, that's likely to be Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal, Manchester United and Tottenham. It's difficult, not impossible, to make a case for Newcastle at this stage in your development, irrespective of how much money you will or won't spend, to get inside the top 6. I'm thinking if you get inside the top 10, stabilise inside there, you start to build yourself a launch sequence. So I think you've got to be patient. Not a good trait, I suspect, for most football fans, but it's a reality that Newcastle have their engine started. They have a manager that I was slightly critical of in terms of his appointment, that has done very well last year. The most important thing is to keep the forward momentum. They bought good players in January, £93 million of a spend. They're going to spend between 50 and 100 million probably in this transfer window. Come on now, you've had 13 years of Mike Ashley, which you loathed. You know, you're in a good place and a good space. Keep the expectations realistic, and then you will build a club that will be sustainable, and no one will ever accuse you, as often is the case with Newcastle's fan base, that your expectations exceed the reality of the football club. You have a huge opportunity with this wealth, irrespective of whether I like the ownership model is a different discussion. And I just think that if you can buy sensibly, because there's people waiting for you to not buy sensibly or to pay over the odds, and build, that you have an opportunity to be amongst the elite. The question seems to be predicated on the fact that would I find enhancing drug enhancement in sport somewhat acceptable? I have to be honest, I think it's a slightly ludicrous question because it flies in the face of what sports is supposed to be. It's supposed to be about natural achievement, not drug-induced enhancements. And whilst I suspect the argument could be steeped in, well, if everyone's doing it, then it's an equal playing field. First of all, I don't think that's an example you should want to set to children that follow their sporting icons into sport, that perhaps they should stick a needle in their arm to get themselves some sort of enhancement, because that comes with a variety of challenges. Second of all, there is something macabre about manufacturing achievements through enhancements. And I know there's a variety of different medical fields that you could say that perhaps do that, but I can't make an argument to give too much credence to this question. I don't want sports stars to cheat their way to achievements. I don't want drug enhancements to give people the opportunity to compete at the highest level. I want people to be able to be naturally talented, to enhance themselves based upon natural means, and for there to be no drugs in sport, not for there to be a justification that it's a free-for-all. So I'm afraid that's not a particularly cool question, and one I want to give overly too much credence and time to. Do I see Conte having a short tenure? Well, that all depends on what he achieves, because a short tenure is a double-edged sword. Sometimes a short tenure is that the manager not getting what he wanted and off on his bike. The other one is the manager not doing what he's supposed to do and getting fired. Conte, for me, is a very good manager, and there's a lot of myth about how much money he spends. If you look back over his track record, he does spend money, but he also sells players and brings in a lot of income. So when you look at the net cost of what Conte brings into a football club, it isn't quite as expensive as people think it is. But also, without doubt, what he brings is a very different feel, vibe and substance to a football club, and tends to win more often than not. Now, if the language of Tottenham Hotspur is that Conte, within reason, can have what he requires, why would there need to be a short tenure? Spurs have the opportunity with this guy, with the squad that they're building, to perhaps get something this season or to get closer to it. I think they will cement inside the top 4, and I think they may find themselves being successful in a cup competition, and that cup competition may be an early elimination from the Champions League and a winning of the Europa League. That's me speculating on the achievements at Tottenham Hotspur. But short tenures and the reasons behind them need to be evaluated. I don't necessarily think Conte would have left Inter Milan last summer if Inter Milan weren't in freefall economically as a result of the COVID situation inside football, where they wiped out a lot of their money and needed to sell some of their best players, and he was resistant to it. So with that in mind, I think we should be looking at half full glasses. Conte is here. He's a fabulous addition to the Premier League. Whilst I think he can be a temperamental Italian at times, and before anyone gets into the idea that I'm stereotyping people by their nationality, there is an element of temperamentality about Conte, and he's Italian. So with that in mind, I think Conte is a wonderful addition to the Premier League. I think he makes Tuchel, Klopp and Guardiola have a look over their shoulder. And I hope, not because I have any vested interest in Tottenham, because I don't, that Tottenham are very competitive this season, give their fans something to really applaud, and Conte keeps developing them and is here for a period of time a lot longer than perhaps his previous stay at Chelsea. I think it's a strange fight. Someone's got to come up in weight, someone's got to come down in weight. So it kind of makes it a bit of a mongrel of a fight in certain ways. But from a fighting perspective, because of the names, it has box office, it has gold dust attached to it, it has dollars attached to it. Conor Benn is a real prospect. Conor Benn, I think, will be a world title holder. I would prefer to see Conor Benn fighting Keith Thurman. But if this fight is being made, they're both certainly going to get paid. But at this stage in Conor Benn's career, I think it's possibly a risk that he doesn't need to take. I would have preferred to see him go in against someone like David Evanesian, which also is a risk, but it gives real credibility to the situation. Who do I think wins it? I think it's a real debatable one, because I'm surprised that either camp would put either of their fighters into this, because you don't put a fighter in at this stage, certainly in Conor Benn's career, and when you're close perhaps to Eubank getting a world title shot, even if it's a vacated world title, into a fight they could both lose, because it's a pick 'em fight. My gut feel tells me that Eubank should be too big, but the work ethic of Eubank in fights leaves, and I know there was an injury in the last one which could have conspired to suggest that the work ethic dropped, means that the ferocity of Conor Benn gives me a feeling towards him. So whilst that is not much of an answer, it's a pick 'em fight, so I'm finding it difficult to pick. I think Conor Benn, if I'm being pushed. Well, there's two kinds of minimum expectations for Aston Villa. There's three kinds actually. There's the ones that the owners four actually. There's the ones that owners put on it. There's the one that the manager will put on it. There's the one that the fans will put on. There's the one that the media will put on it. Fans, if you're a Villa fan, will expect your team to be progressing into the top half of the table, into the higher echelons, which means getting towards the top 8, moving towards the top 6. Whether you've got the squad to achieve that is a different matter. Gerrard will want to see Villa doing better than they've done in previous seasons and building upon a slightly shaky base in the first season, better second, and obviously the challenges that have gone with the replacement of Dean Smith and the arrival of Gerrard have had peaks and troughs. The media will have perceptions of how it's going to be based upon who's in the dugout and how much money they've spent and who they've lost, like Jack Grealish in the past. And the owners might have a degree of reality about it. And really and truly, the most important expectations, besides the fans whose emotional investment in the club is probably the most important, but the real most important one is probably the owner and the managers. I think Villa will do well to get near the top 8. I think they've got to do better than they're currently doing. I think the Gerrard project, I was slightly unconvinced about Gerrard in Scotland. I've become more convinced the more I see of him in the Premier League, but I still think he has questions to answer. And if they continue the way they finished certain aspects of last season, I fear that the Gerrard project may not be a long-running one. So I don't know if that's an answer, but I think if Villa get inside the top 10, I'd say you have to have an element of perception about success in that, and then you have to determine what looks like the next level for Villa, with Gerrard still in control, into an 18-month project with maybe more spend, more transfer windows. So I think this year, if Villa can get 9th, then Gerrard can look at himself saying, we're in the right direction. And then it's about how much support he gets to maybe bridge that gap between 9th and 6th, which is a huge ask, given the amount of teams that are in that stratosphere and teams like Newcastle that are building with potential huge wealth behind them. I am an admirer of Brendan Rodgers, not everything he does, but the bulk of it. I watched his career develop from coming out of Chelsea and going into Watford and Reading and not particularly hitting his straps there, but then landing in Swansea and building a side out from there. He has been at big clubs. He's been at Liverpool and Celtic. These are big clubs. Celtic might be in a 2-horse race in Scotland, but they still have huge expectations, and the achievements under Brendan were pretty monumental. Leicester, he's won them an FA Cup, and Leicester was the stepping stone back into the Premier League for Brendan. I can see Brendan stepping up and stepping on, if that doesn't sound too disrespectful to Leicester. I can see Brendan managing an Arsenal, if you consider Arsenal in the same light that you once did before. I think he is a very good manager. I think he's a very good communicator. I didn't agree with his sentiments after the Leicester defeat to Nottingham Forest in the Cup last year, because I thought it was a little bit lightweight and a little bit weak, but that's the exception that doesn't prove the rule. I think he's a first-class manager. I think Leicester is a first-class football club. So the argument shouldn't be, should Leicester be a stepping stone? The argument should be, can he rebuild Leicester back to heights that they've been in previous seasons, or have they reached their ceiling? And somewhere down the line, will Brendan find himself in an alternative environment that might be perceived to be bigger by its very nature of its history and livery? And I can see him at places like Arsenal, which is not me talking Arteta out of a job. If I went back to Palace in some sort of parallel universe and I had to hire either Danny Murphy, Trevor Sinclair or Martin Keown, who would I take in the management role? Well, it would be difficult because it's sort of a feast and famine mentality there. If I wanted to worry about the well-being of my players and needed them looking after better because they were being treated terribly on £50,000 a week, I'd bring in Martin to make sure that their bottoms were being wiped. If I wanted to amuse them and take them into the area of mirth and mayhem and have everybody point the finger at us and have a laugh, I'd bring in Trevor Sinclair. If I wanted to bring a dark cloud over the place, a bit like Eeyore, I'd bring Danny Murphy in. But in real terms, if I was going to look at a solution, I'd like to morph them all into one and take the gravitas at times of Martin Keown, take the honesty, albeit misguided sometimes, from Trevor Sinclair, and also some of the tactical insight from Danny Murphy, morph it into one perfect component and put that in as the manager. Right, that's it for this week's edition of One-to-One. I'm off on the holidays, but listen, don't forget to give me your opinions on Aston Villa, Conte, and of course, the Eubank versus Benn fight. Keep liking and subscribing, keep leaving your questions in the comment section below, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time.